A few disclosures before we begin. I was an Apple retail employee for 2 years and amicably resigned in favor of full-time, post-college employment several months before this unfolded. Additionally, the central issue of this post seems minor. I didn't want to change my password, so some may find this more appropriate for r/petty revenge. But as it involves an extensive court battle, I think r/pro revenge is a better venue. Although the main issue will definitely make me look petty, it was the straw that broke the camel's back based on Apple's pompousness throughout the issue. About a year and a half ago, I was having issues with both my MacBook and iPhone, and went on to schedule a Genius Bar appointment. This used to be an easy task. You just went to the support site and scheduled one. But over time, Apple has foolishly attempted to reduce the load on the Genius Bars by putting up various roadblocks to getting an appointment. I assume Angela has just decided that this is cheaper than hiring more staff, and that most of the customers are rabid enough to still buy Apple tech despite the blow this causes to decent customer service. After finally jumping through a number of hoops to get a Genius Bar appointment, I'm prompted to enter my Apple ID and password. I'm told that, since it's been 3 months, I need to change it, for what is now probably the 10th time since having that Apple ID. I can continue to use it on the App Store and iCloud and such. But if I want a service appointment, I must change it. Having gone through this for the last several times to get an appointment, I finally hit my wit's end, decided it's an unnecessary step to just get my product serviced, and escalate the matter through the BBB. Apple's initial response to the BBB is a form letter saying that I need to just change the password because it's in my best interests for security reasons, and that they won't make any exceptions. I respond again, indicating that this is bad customer service and incongruent with the Apple Credo, customer service principles, that all employees are trained in. Their next response was that Apple considers this matter closed. I hate that response. It's corporate speak for "you're not worth our time anymore, go away." The BBB closed the case shortly thereafter. I do some research and determine that, through my AppleCare Plus policy that I was paying for on both devices, there was actually no catch-all clause for why Apple could refuse to service the device. There were several exclusions, but arbitrary account security requirements were not part of them. I file suit in small claims court for replacement value of the laptop and phone. Here's where things got interesting. I show up to the court date, and the case is called. I come up to my podium, and at the defendant's podium appears the manager from the store I used to work at. It was in the same county as the court, but significantly farther away than an Apple store that was actually a mile from the courthouse. I never confirmed this, but I think Apple didn't pay attention to the details of the complaint on the form, just did a name lookup, and assumed that because I had previously worked at the store, that this was some employment dispute. The judge asks me to explain why I am suing, and in about a minute I'm able to concisely explain that Apple was putting up an unnecessary and extra-contractual blockade to me getting a service appointment for my broken devices, so I was suing to replace the devices. The judge then turns to the store manager, who has arrived at court in a t-shirt and jeans. I'm in a full suit out of respect for the court, but before asking for Apple's side of the story, asks if the manager is a lawyer. The manager says he is not. The judge says that my state's laws require that only a chief executive or registered agent can represent a company in court, or they have to hire a lawyer to remove it to a higher district court. The manager responds that he understands, but that he's happy to set up a Genius Bar appointment right here, right now, at my convenience, to get the products repaired. The judge deems this reasonable. We agree on a time for me to come into my old store for service, and the cases continue for 2 weeks out on the chance that things don't work out. I attend my appointment, and the technician is able to resolve all of my issues, and in addition, a senior Apple technician contacts me by email to indicate that he's overriding the password expiration requirement on my Apple ID, and I will never have to change it again. Cool deal. But I'm still out $60 for filing this court case to actually get things moving along. I appear for the continued court date, and the same manager appears again, too. The docket is especially busy on this date, and we have a different judge who is slashing through cases, no nonsense. We're called, and I indicate that while we were able to resolve the problems with my equipment since the original trial and am no longer seeking replacement value for my products, I should not have had to sue Apple to get this type of treatment that aligned with their contractual obligations to me as an AppleCare Plus customer, and believe that I should be awarded the $60 in court fees. The judge turns to the store manager and asks if he is a lawyer. Manager says no. Judge number 2 gives him the same spiel. Manager retorts that he still believes that the court fees shouldn't be Apple's responsibility because blah blah blah, and judge, pressed for time, turns to me and says, I assume you don't want to have to come back here again for them to get a lawyer. I say no, thinking that he's going to give me the full $60. But instead he says, okay, then you'll just split it so that we don't have to waste any more time on this. $30 to the plaintiff. According to my state's laws, a prevailing party gets all of their court costs. As such, I really disagree with the way the judge handled that, splitting it because he was in a hurry. I reach out to Apple's paralegal who had emailed me right after the original trial to confirm that Genius Bar appointment, cite the relevant law and say that the judge was pretty clearly in the wrong, and ask Apple to just cut me a check for the full $60. Otherwise, I have to appeal, which was an extra $125. They would surely lose, and then owe me $185. I was more or less appealing to their common sense. They didn't have any, responding that they would follow the court's judgment only and cut a check for $30. I think their pompousness continued in assuming that I was bluffing about the appeal. So, I appealed. Since the small claims court is a subordinate of the district court, it actually got appealed to the highest court in the county, the circuit court. This is big boy court. No bullshitting. I appear for my court date and again, the same manager shows up. Judge is a bouncy guy in a bowdy, clearly had his coffee and is pleasant to everyone. I present my case, that the lower court only awarded me partial costs, and the state law required that I get the entire amount since judgment was entered in my favor. Judge turns to the manager. Are you a lawyer? He says no, but he has a letter from Apple's chief legal counsel saying that it's okay with them that the manager represents them. The judge does not like this and his demeanor changes instantly. Apple does not decide what you can or cannot do in my courtroom. You need an attorney, so we'll probably need to continue this case. Judge turns to me. Do you object to a continuance for the defendant to get an attorney? I say yes, I do, Your Honor, because they've actually been told 3 times now that they need to have a lawyer, and they keep disrespecting this court by sending the same layman to argue on their behalf. Judge turns to the manager, and with a sarcastic grin and obviously fake, it's out of my hands hand gesture, says, sorry. Judgment is entered in my favor for $185. As if that wasn't good enough, after 30 days, Apple still hasn't paid. I reach out to the paralegal again, and they say that they are still looking into their options, as if they were going to appeal to the state Supreme Court, which had to have been done within those 30 days. Again, Apple thinks that they're too good to follow court instructions or do what's best for them. But they seem to have forgotten that I used to work from them. I had my credit union look up one of the old AC's transactions from my payroll, and I asked them what bank that was drafted from. They tell me Wachovia. I go back to court, file garnishment proceedings against Apple via Wachovia. I was able to skip the discovery portion since I already knew where they were keeping at least $185. And Wachovia, of course, cuts me a check within days. Apple are pompous assholes who won't just do what's best for them and a customer relationship. Refuse to do a basic service via customer service channels, gets sued. Continuously disrespects court orders to involve legal counsel instead of a hippie in jeans, and gets the hammer from a circuit court judge. Doesn't pay their judgment, gets it garnished out of their payroll account.
My boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it. eventually leading us to start a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on, and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart, so one of our main priorities for the future was moving in together and closing the distance. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues, and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older, I began to play RuneScape less and less, as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems. In November of last year, I couldn't help pay his monthly rent. I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, he freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggesting that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he returned home, which I know for a fact isn't true, because him and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive-aggressive the entire night, and we eventually hung up. Because I cared about him, I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two, and if there were any local jobs he could work in order to, make an end to him. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid $15/har and was super easy, lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night, and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a shitty warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in, day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area, and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm also an industrial meteorologist. If I remember correctly, that's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night, and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come, and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house, and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal because I spoiled him, and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both him and I put our money together to fly him across the U.S. to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave here?" the Discord message read. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck in that moment, but I kept myself together as best as I could without killing him. I had never felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor, and I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape, and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay, and I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that fucker climb into bed with me, and he tried initiating sex because it was our final night together. I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed, but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I feared that I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right after all. Not only had he been cheating on me, he had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. He had talked shit about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive, just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my nudes so they could pick me apart physically. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer, playing RuneScape and eating my food. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind, and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him, I wanted to tear him apart, and kick him out of my house onto the street, but I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning, because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport, and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever, unbeknownst to him. I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split, and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time he arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago, where him and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby. We had always joked that if we were to ever split up, he would take half of the account's bank contents and I would take the rest. I took my half and transferred it to my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it. Even items I couldn't normally trade away. I used a spell to convert the items into coins which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account were written down in my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account. I immediately took all of the contents of his bank and sold it all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank, but he would still be flying home for about another 4 hours, so I had plenty of time. By the time I had destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now what to spend it on? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless, stupid thing I could think of, besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance in my revenge. I asked him what the most obscure, unwanted item was of the bird food variety was, and he replied, burnt spider. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of the item, spider on shaft, burnt, in his bank that he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend a full stack of 147 billion coins and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burnt spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With the remaining money, I decided to treat myself. I went on to the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of in-game membership. After trading all 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years of membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly 150,000 coins in his bank, all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left, so I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laughed for a while. Now I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel, you ruined the tens of thousands of hours he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bitch, a mean bitch. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled his defense skill. This may not sound bad. In fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress, right? Well, no. Unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never, ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1, in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense. Cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head, I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, he must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to rebuy everything with his non-existent money if he wants a new house. Bye-bye, Casa de Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them. All of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You're able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed his to let everybody know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him with a 12-character limit. He should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. He sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message officially ending the relationship, while also scaring him away by threatening to take him to court over sharing my nudes, and possibly filing a cease and desist if he were to contact me anytime soon. I don't plan on doing any of that. I just don't want to speak to him ever again. Boyfriend of 5 years that I had financially supported for everything decided to cheat on me and spread my nudes. I wasted his RuneScape riches on 6,000 dead spiders and completely trashed his 14+ years of effort, leaving him with nothing to show for but a shameful username. Wow, I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did lol. To clarify, this post is referring to old school RuneScape rather than RuneScape 3. We met playing RS3, but immediately put all of our focus into old school when it first released. He even transferred 90% of his RS3 worth over to old school through bots and such, making this revenge even sweeter. So while his old school account is only 6 years old, as is mine, his fortunes were the collective effort of a previous 8 years on RS3.